Welcome to Your Bird Story, a podcast about everyday people and their relationships and interactions with wild birds. I'm your host, Georgia Silvera Seamans. Hi, everyone. I'm going to start off this episode by reading from the introduction to one of the guests' books. The title of the book is Bird Love, and it is by Wenfei Tong. And I'm reading from the introduction. There are lots of pieces I could read from the introduction, but I just really love this opening, and I think it will set the stage for the conversation. Bird family life can look rosy, from the long-term pair bonds of parrots and albatrosses to the many species in which both sexes, and sometimes an extended family, share parental care duties. However, nature is amoral, and a darker side, including sexual conflict, infanticide, and civilicide, is equally common. This book examines how and why both the light and dark sides of bird family life have evolved. So, welcome Wenfei Tong and welcome Bryony Angell.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bryony, you've been on the show before where you spoke about comestibles like chocolate and maple syrup that are certified bird friendly, and I'd love for you to reintroduce yourself to listeners.
Yes, my name's Bryony Angell. I'm a freelance writer. My focus is on birding culture, so I write about the people part of birding and all that encompasses, and with an ultimate interest in promoting lifestyle changes and ideas that support bird conservation. And I'm published widely in birding media and some mainstream media, and I'm based in Washington State.
Thanks, Bryony. And Wenfei, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much for having me, Georgia. So I grew up in Singapore, big city, and loved animals from the get-go. I think I sort of knew everyone's dog's names before I knew the human name. And basically discovered birds quite early on as something you could enjoy about nature without having access to a large savanna or charismatic megafauna. At the same time, I really loved books, and I think books were my main entry into enjoying nature and other species. And now I live in Ithaca, New York, upstate New York, where I work at the Lab of Ornithology, which is sort of like a dream come true in terms of a landing place for someone who cares deeply about the natural world and about giving people a chance to connect to other species, especially through birds. I trod a fairly traditional academic path early on. I got a PhD in evolutionary biology, so that's where a lot of my motivations in that lovely opening paragraph you read from come from. Very excited to be on this podcast. Thank you.
Welcome to you both. So since I read from Bird Love, and it was only a very brief part of this really captivating book, I really encourage folks to go out and get yourself a copy. You will not be able to put it down. Wenfei, can you tell us about the book, your inspiration? What does it cover? Why should people read it?
Oh my, self-promotion is not a strong suit of mine, but the inspiration, I guess, to what I was saying about loving books, loving literature, and loving biology. And since writing the book, actually, it's almost like nice reminder as to what inspired me to write it in the first place, is to break down some of the perceived barriers that humans create between ourselves and the rest of nature, that perhaps enables us to perform actions that are not so great for the environment or for nature or for other species. And to me, it's really interesting to apply both human literature, type of human psychology perspective on human behavior, as well as an animal behavior lens on that. And so what I try to do in this book is take examples from the diversity of different bird species you see throughout the world and showcase how those very different species in different places solve some of the common challenges that humans experience throughout our lives, all the way from whether or not to find a mate, to how to find a mate, to how to rear offspring and who to rear them with, and how to grow up with siblings. So all these different facets of bird family life and bird social life, with the ultimate intention of connecting people to the animals and the creatures that surround them.
And this how to find a mate piece, this is how Bryony connected with you. And so, Bryony, I want to ask you to tell us the story of learning about Wenfei's book, putting it down, and then picking it back up again.
Yes, Wenfei's book came out pre-pandemic, but not long before that. I had seen it listed in bird book reviews, probably American Birding Association magazine, and was immediately curious about it. I think I even might have checked it out from the library, and it sat in a pile of books to read. I skimmed through it and I thought, oh, this looks, I really want to have time to sit and read this one day. And so it came and went out of my life with that initial publication. It always stayed in the back of my head as, something to resume reading, when I had the time or the context. And my life changed pretty dramatically. I went through a divorce and I found I was re-entering the dating scene as a middle-aged woman. And I anticipated it was going to be kind of a roller coaster. And I thought, what could I do to make this a productive experience, beyond possibly finding, a partner? How could I add some levity, some humor to this? I anticipate it's going to be pretty fraught. I thought back to Wenfei's book. And so this time I bought it. I thought, I want to have this book in my possession. I want to read it this time and underline places, and I'm going to use this as a jumping off point to approach dating like field research. I thought, what kind of bird am I, out in the field, and what kind of birds am I encountering? What are their behaviors? This might be fun to write about one day, just dating like a bird. And lo and behold, that is kind of what unfolded. And my experience in dating was pretty colorful, and I got a lot of notes from it and ideas. And I eventually wrote the piece that is coming out in Birdwatchers Digest December 2025. It is referencing Wenfei's book. And I had gotten pretty far into writing this essay, and I thought, I'm really curious to talk to Wenfei. I have a few more questions. They're not immediately obvious to me in reading her book. I mean, maybe she knows the answers to these. And I contacted her, I believe, through her website. And the rest is history. And our interaction became part of the essay. So I wasn't done. I couldn't have finished it without her direct presence in this story. So I'm just delighted that was the full circle that came about from first finding her book and then having context for it and then including her in this story that I wrote.
I do like this mashup of maybe pop culture and science. I think it's really brilliant. And I think this idea of looking for love is a universal experience, perhaps. And so to be able to ground that in your love for the natural world and specifically for birds is really fantastic. Wenfei, can you describe what it was like for you to have such an enthusiastic reader of your work contact you?
Wow, it was the best thing that had happened since the book came out, I think, because I suddenly felt like this thing that had sort of sunk like a stone during the pandemic. Suddenly someone got it. It must be how someone who's a religious proselytizer must feel when they get their first convert or something. I felt like, wow, not only does this person understand where I'm coming from in terms of breaking down barriers between ourselves and other species. And, I'm by no means the first person to espouse this. Jane Goodall, who just passed away, is so famous for this. But I got dinged so many times, and I still do sometimes, for using anthropomorphic language or something like that. And that's not the intent behind the book, but it is very key to the whole idea of writing this book, that we're just not very different from all the other species that we inhabit the planet with. So yeah, it was great to see Bryony's email. And I was in Singapore visiting my parents at the time, so things were a bit fraught with the usual intense family interactions that you get if you don't see your parents for a while and then you visit again. And this was a lovely connection with a real kindred spirit from all the way across the world, because Bryony was on the West Coast at the time.
Something you said in this response, Wenfei, I want to stay with it. You mentioned that people might not be as receptive to your particular characterizations of non-human animals. And if you'll indulge me, I do want to read again because you write about this very thing. And the way you explained it in the book is it's so accessible. And I think because of the ways in which you talk about animals and their behavior, I think it makes the science behind what they're doing much easier for really anyone without a PhD in evolutionary biology to embrace and understand. Okay, so here's the piece. This book is peppered with analogies and the language of agency as shorthand for describing the long-term evolutionary benefits underlying bird behavior. Saying something like, quote, birds will evolve to bring more food to chicks in response to louder hunger cries if the genetic variation for that behavioral rule is passed on to a larger proportion of the next generation, end quote, is rather a mouthful. To avoid giving you indigestion, I resort to giving birds agency. I don't know, that really jumped out at me. And I would love for more scientists and scientific writers to embrace this approach.
Thank you. I should say, I had inspiration and mentors for that line of thinking, one of which is Richard Dawkins of Selfish Gene fame, who is the first person, I think, to coin the word meme as another unit of evolutionary change. And the funny thing is the meme has become such an effective meme later on. But yes, evolutionary biologists do tie themselves in knots about whether or not to imbue things like genes, inanimate things, with agency as a shorthand for basically creating a mental model for understanding how something like biological inheritance works.
I was a biology undergrad, but that was so far in the past.
Yeah, I'm really being put to the test now because I have a 4-year-old and he's asking me very, very good questions about things like how babies are made. The language is changing all the time.
Yeah. Bryony, so you picked this book up again, you read it feverishly, and I'm curious, how did you go about extracting and applying the lessons in bird love to your courtship rituals?
I started writing down lots of questions to think about as I read the book that were directly related to human courtship and all the hearsay I was encountering both from the media and from other friends who were in the same space of re-entering the dating life at middle age. And so, things like, is there a history of, gossip among birds? Or, do birds ghost each other? I know about polyamory in bird life, but what exactly defines, a monogamous bird couple? Is it really monogamous, or is it really for life? What are the gradations of behavior and, duration of time spent together? Because birds migrate too. And obviously they're not hanging out together during migration. It's only during the mating season. And so there were all these different approaches to, size, the species type, habitat, model of courtship. Was it, individual one-on-one, or was it a lek where everybody gathered? A lek totally reminded me of a nightclub, or for that matter, the dating app. I mean, there's a lek. For those who don't know what a lek is, it's where prairie birds gather. Well, prairie birds are an easy example here in the United States. They gather to show off their feathers, and females also gather to watch. And ultimately, the females pick. So that's not unlike this sort of shopping idea of a dating app or a nightclub where there's presentation and, look at me kind of activity going on. And those sorts of things really amused me. And they took the urgency out of what I was experiencing. I fully considered myself, doing field research while I was going on dates. And, I was very much present as, a person on the date, but I also was taking notes for this idea to write about it. And ultimately, I could come back to Wenfei's book and synthesize what I'd been experiencing based on where I would land in her book. Some of the information I was looking for specifically was ultimately why I contacted her for some specific information. To give an example of, being older in the dating scene, what was the experience of an older female bird if her partner dies, for instance? Is she able to find a new mate? Is age a thing in birding courtship? Do younger male birds care if the female is older? I mean, things like that. So that was exciting to parse out with Wenfei.
That's a really juicy question.
Yeah, that's a great research question someone should embark on. It probably speaks to one of those things where the experience of the researcher and researchers in the past very much color what we know nowadays.
I was finding a lot of the research didn't focus on the female once the pair bond was established. It focused on the male's behavior, but not in the receptivity of the female. How does she respond to that behavior after they've established that pair bond? It was all from the perspective of the male bird. So there was follow-up I was curious about. Yeah.
Well, one of my favorite chapters to write in the book was what I call my women's lib chapter, which is all the examples of where the female birds are the ones that are larger, showier, have multiple mates, and what the females do is mostly lay the eggs and move on.
That seems very radical. I think if one were to shout that from the rooftops, perhaps some of the responses would.
Well, and also that's probably more like what birds are the only living dinosaurs left, or some of the birds that branched off on the bird side just after dinosaurs were a thing, like ostriches, what we call the ratites, ostriches, emus, cassowaries, things like that. They all have mostly paternal care, dads caring for the eggs and chicks.
I think if only bird natural history, especially with the caretaking piece, were more widely known. There's this clinging to this idea of the big silverback kind of male example that trumps all other examples of masculinity in the mammal or the, let's say species, creatures, all living creatures, when in fact it's much, much more nuanced and varied.
I noticed that earlier in the book, Wenfei, you write about this sort of traditional obsession with binaries that nature sort of flouts at every corner. So there's definitely nature, including our own selves, much more complex than we give credit for. I wanted to turn to Mr. Osprey. Mr. Osprey has a big role in this story. And Bryony, when did you realize that your mate resembled the characteristics of an osprey?
Well, it was reading Wenfei's book. She had a specific paragraph or a couple of paragraphs about osprey courtship and how the male, he pretty much love bombs the mate he's trying to woo. And an osprey being kind of, salt and pepper and associated with fish in the ocean. These characteristics resembled the man who I was most interested in, and we were definitely courting each other. One of his characteristics was this gift for gift giving. He knew what to give, and just very thoughtful, observational kinds of gifts, just little things. And I was perplexed, being kind of back into the scene, what that all meant. And we have this expression of love bombing. And Wenfei's description of the osprey male was that these were very sincere love bombings going on. And there were no observed examples of a male osprey who delivered gifts and then did not make good on being a good mate. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to go with that. I like that description. And sure enough, Mr. Osprey turned out to be an osprey.
Well, I mean, I know that an osprey courts an osprey, so perhaps you would be the female osprey in this duo. But let's just say, for the sake of, conversation, do you feel that you are a female osprey? What other species might define you very well?
I think I'm an osprey as well. I've got some silver in my hair and I'm a long distance athlete. Like an osprey, they migrate thousands of miles. I'm a one at a time kind of mate. I like a familiarity and I don't eat fish. So in that way, I'm not an osprey, but yes, I think it's safe to say that, yes, I am the receptive female osprey to Mr. Osprey's overtures.
Wenfei, when you were writing Bird Love, was there a particular species that you identified with?
Not really, but I did love the ones in the women's lib chapter, that I keep calling it. I wish I could say I was more like one of those species, but I wasn't like a jacana or something who has multiple males tending her chicks for her, but I never quite managed to. And I'm not sure I really identify with that. I think one thing that Bryony's story brings to light is something that I've grown to appreciate, that I apply in my own worldview all the time, which is a very helpful sense of detachment that I get from viewing my own experiences on a day-to-day basis, both with people I'm very close to as well as people I'm not so close to, and looking at them through the lens of animal behavior or literature, so that I can have this distance that allows me not to take things too personally, and then also to maybe inject it with a bit of humor. So I did make myself laugh afterwards, because some of this book I was writing when I was having a tricky time with my first marriage. And then when the book finally came out and I held the first print copy in my hands, it opened up to this page with two herring gulls looking in opposite directions and looking quite nasty in the way gulls are sometimes want to do. And the caption said something like, in herring gulls, divorce is often triggered by a failed nesting attempt. And I had just, experienced this failed nesting attempt myself. And reading this made me laugh out loud for some reason. It was so spot on. I don't know if I was thinking that subconsciously when I was writing the caption. It's very invigorating to some extent to have these connections come up. I also do just assign birds to different people. So people close to me have their individual bird ringtones.
And just to spring on what you just said, Wenfei, the story that you reference, I do both what you just mentioned. I both associate certain people as specific birds based on their physical appearance and their behavior. And I admit to that effort of trying to keep this what could be a emotionally laborious experience at arm's length to keep myself sane. And science, it provides that kind of comfort. I mean, science provides a certain set of answers. In this case, it was more suggestions that gave detachment, which was helpful in those circumstances. And I found your book to be the same way, in a kind of baseline from which to make my own approach. It's all circular.
Thank you. Yeah, I kind of felt like if people could come away from the book with a few funny table dinner story anecdotes, that would be good enough. But this is even better.
Yeah.
These are really sort of food for thought takeaways. I want to maybe close with this question. As you move through life observing birds, is there a sort of particular set of practices that you use? And would you mind sharing one or all of them?
I interpret that question as sort of what is my approach to birding and everyday life? What sort of birder personality do I inhabit? I mean, these days I'm mostly a happen chance birder. I'm not a lister. I'm more of someone who birds socially. I like birding with other people because I learn so much from other people. I learn from them if they're more skilled, or I learn how to be a better teacher if they're newer to it than I am. And I really like that dynamic energy exchange as a human with another human while we're revering something that is non-human that we both treasure and really, want to protect. I walk through life as a birder. I'm never turned off. I'm always listening or, catching sight of something. And I'm not always trying to identify it. Just knowing it's there is what makes me happy. And knowing that there are other people who care that those same creatures are there, that also makes me happy. So that's the kind of birder I am.
That's so great. I think I really relate to everything you've said. I guess I would add to that birding has become so much just an automatic part of who I am that I would be a bit lost if I wasn't able to hear birds wherever I am. So I used to travel a lot. Post-pandemic, I've been traveling quite a lot again, and lived in different places. So I went from Singapore to various parts of the US and the UK, and then I traveled a lot for field work as well. And I found that the bird song in a place really roots me. So it's almost like having an extra dimension to my existence, to be able to always automatically just pass the environment that I'm in through the birds I'm hearing. I don't always have to see them. Just waking up to the call or song of a different set of species really immediately tells me where I am and makes me feel at home, whether it's in sub-Saharan Africa or Singapore or, the Midwest or something. And then that you shared, Bryony, about really enjoying sharing that love of birds with other people, I definitely try to do that. But I will say I do still very much enjoy and treasure what feel like very special, intimate moments when I have a chance to be in on a little observation of, it could be an everyday bird that you see all the time, like an American robin or black-capped chickadee doing something in your own backyard, but feeling like I'm the special person who got to see this bird who is in my backyard doing something and no one else had the time or was there to notice it. That sort of secret password feeling is something I still love about birds and about nature.
That's very true. That is very true.
All of these things. Bryony, can you tell us one more time about the article? When and where will it be published?
Yes, it's called The Migratory Suitor, and it's going to be published in Birdwatchers Digest, now known as BWD, Birdwatchers Digest. November, December 2025 issue. It will be in that, and it's behind a paywall, but the subscription is affordable and it comes out 6 times a year, and it's great writing, a lot of good columnists, very instructive and also narrative and personal. I'm happy that they gave this piece a place to land.
Congratulations in advance of publication. Wenfei, we've sort of talked a bunch about bird love, and you have another book. Can you let us know about that one?
So I think that one in America goes by title of Understanding Bird Behavior, which is not the title I wanted to choose, but that basically sums it up. It's basically the same themes as bird love, but going beyond bird family life to other things that birds do, like migrating or not, or other reasons birds might sing in addition to trying to attract a mate or trying to defend their territory. And I've been told by some people it's a lot more readable. So I think I was trying to figure out how to write for a popular non-scientific audience in bird love, and was maybe trying to do a bit too much in a book that's very much picture image driven. And by the time I wrote Understanding Bird Behavior, I'd settled down into, okay, I only have 500 to 1,000 words per section, so just make it snappy and don't try to write a treatise. This is not the origin of species. And yeah, I think it goes by different titles in different countries, but don't fall for the Amazon trick of buying the same book a few times. The UK version, I like the cover a lot more. It's How to Read a Bird or something, and the cover is pretty.
Well, we'll link to all of this amazing writing and science in the show notes. And I really want to thank both of you for joining me today for this episode. As always, I come away with lots of new information and lots of new perspective on how I move through the world as a bird person. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Your Bird Story. Like, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Your Bird Story is an initiative of Local Nature Lab.